UFC 218, Holloway, Aldo 2, Detroit, Michigan is the site. The night is Saturday night. If you followed UFC from a betting perspective, you know this guy. He is Lou. You can check his work out at GambLou. MMA expert to be sure. He's done a few radio shows with me over the last couple of years, and we're glad to have him on. Does a lot of work with Matt Humans over at VSiN. I want to get to a fight or two that you're risking your bankroll on, Lou, in just a bit, but let's talk about the top of the card for just a moment. I'm talking about the co-main events. First up, you got Max Holloway, a 290 favorite or so, over José Aldo, the comeback 245 in the battle for the lightweight championship. Holloway was supposed to fight Frankie Edgar, as you know, and Edgar gets banged up. Aldo decides to take the fight. The good thing for Aldo is that he's not coming in totally rusty. You know, he was training to fight already against Ricardo Lamas. So it's not like he's coming in without having been in the octagon for a while. The bad news for me, Lou, about Aldo is that if you watch his recent fights, he seems to have less confidence going to his legs as his career gets a little bit later in the later stages. I don't see him throwing the kicks he used to. That could hurt him here in this fight, as it did the first fight.
Yeah, I totally agree, but I find a little inconsistency with this fight. The first fight, Aldo opens minus 130, he closes minus 140, so a relatively tight fight. This time it opens 270. Now, let's look before this fight was announced, when Aldo was scheduled to fight Frankie Edgar. Let's remember a couple of years ago, José Aldo pieced Frankie Edgar up.
True.
When Holloway gets broke on his line against Frankie, he comes 205. So in a roundabout way, what I'm trying to say is Holloway is way overinflated here. And while I do see some waning of Aldo's skills, let's take into account that he did win the first 2 rounds against Holloway in that first fight before he ran out of gas. It was in Brazil. He lost tremendous face. That gym had at one point 4 world champions, now 0. Aldo's fighting for his name. He's fighting for his country, he's fighting for his gym. And in this particular case, with the value steeped on Aldo, I believe that we can trust we're going to get his absolute best performance. Will that be enough against the longer, younger champion? I find it's different holding on to the belt than it is attaining it. And for all those reasons, I'm looking at, plus 255, plus 210, anywhere in there for Aldo. I believe there's good value on José Aldo.
You made great reasons with that line move being different from where it was. What was it, 212? It was only
and that was
6
June.
cards ago.
Yes.
Yeah, so it wasn't like this was, 5 years ago when these two fight and all of a sudden one guy's skills has deteriorated so much that you have to increase that line like they have here on Max Holloway. What's the difference that Aldo has to do? You mentioned he started so well the first couple of rounds. Max Holloway's kind of that kind of fighter. He builds. He starts out a little slow sometimes, and then he builds as the fight carries through. And he's got, he's the better striker of the two, I would think. I mean, you might disagree with me, but I think he's the better striker of the two. Can he sit around and lose the first couple of rounds and turn the fight around in his favor again?
I don't know how Aldo is going to prepare himself to go further. I don't see him ending this thing in the first 2, but I do think that perhaps he comes with some pace. I do believe we're going to see those leg kicks again, which is a dynamic weapon for him, and also a dynamic weapon against a longer, lankier fighter in the octagon. It'll be interesting to see a great fight, but I do believe that this fight's way closer than what these lines indicate.
Lou, the co-main event, Alistair Overeem against Francis Ngannou. I'm telling you right now, if you go to the fridge for a bite to eat or you blink your eye, you might miss this fight. The over-under is 1.5 rounds. Juice on the under. I was listening to Joe Rogan the other day talking about Francis Ngannou. I didn't know it not until not too long ago, but Ngannou was actually homeless, living on the streets of France when he was kind of discovered. But Rogan was talking about the other day on his podcast about the fact that Ngannou was clocked as having the hardest punch in the world of everybody they've ever measured. They've got a machine that they travel around the world with, and you punch it, and it measures your strength. And Ngannou has the toughest, hardest punch that's ever been measured. Can Alistair Overeem overcome this? Because if you catch Overeem, he's going down. We've seen it before.
Great point. Overeem has a porcelain chin. We know this. That said, in his last fights, he's beaten guys like Dos Santos. He was competitive against Miocic. Beat Mark Hunt, who if he hits this building, it falls down. Overeem has been fighting for 15 plus years. His record, 45-15-1, and it's not padded. He's well more experienced. He's well more precise. If you watch Ngannou fight, he fights, as Angelo Dundee used to say, with Sunday shots. They come from Sunday. His left is very wide and it's never straight.
Right.
While Ngannou has power, he does not have experience. I think the experience realm on Overeem, his size, precision, and the ability to fight on the floor is the key to this fight. I also think that Overeem must get this fight into the second round. I love the over in the fight.
Nice,
I believe Overeem has the IQ and the ability to stay away from Ngannou, take him into the second round, let this big, huge guy get all swole up, slow down. I love Overeem in this fight, and I don't like taking guys with glass jaws.
Sure.
Ngannou came from the streets, but if you watch the recent embeddeds from the UFC, he's taken helicopter flights around Vegas. He's
living life.
He's being regarded as a superstar before he's earned it, I think. I've had discussions with other UFC fighters who have thought he's come off a little bit aloof. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I think Overeem is in a good spot here. This thing opened Ngannou like minus 190 or minus 200. They're begging you to take him.
Yeah.
I smell a fish.
I like it. I like it. All right, those are your two main events. Let's get to, and I'm going to just throw it at you and you knock them down. Two fights that you're putting your bankroll on over it. And by the way, I wanted to mention again, you can follow Lou at GambLou on Twitter. A lot of great MMA information daily from Lou. But let's get to a couple of fights you're putting your bankroll on.
Yeah, well, we'll go down the way a little bit into the fight, into, I don't know, the Fox part of the card before we get to the pay-per-view. And you have Paul Felder fighting a guy named Chaz Oliveira. Felder opens 170, fights Oliveira, who's plus 130. Oliveira is a dynamic floor fighter. He has trouble with bullies that are going to come in and walk straight into him with strikes, but those bullies tend to be wrestling-based fighters, and Felder has very little wrestling base and has been trying to develop it. And in a long way, what I'm trying to say is I don't think Felder has the tools to keep this fight off the floor. And if he doesn't have the tools to keep the fight off the floor, I think Oliveira gets that fight to the floor, and he's very, very live when he does. Oliveira plus 130 was a release we made a couple days ago. I think you could find him minus 120 or 125 locally now. And as a dog, I think Charles Oliveira is in a good position.
Chalk or underdog between Klose and Teymur?
Yeah, Klose is an MMA lab fighter, and I have to give credit to the lab. John Crouch and those people there have spoon-fed me UFC intel. I go there and watch sparring. Close fights there. Teymur is a stand-up striking-based fighter that is less rounded than Klose. And while Klose believes and feels he can compete with Teymur stand-up, I do believe this fight also has to hit the floor for Klose to have advantage. I believe that most fights also usually do hit the floor. And with that in mind, Klose at plus 140, 150 today would surely be one of the best bets, and it's also a fight that we've already released to our enthusiasts.
Great stuff. He is Lou. Check him out on Twitter at GambLou. As you can tell, the guy knows his stuff. Get in the octagon with Lou this week, and you're sure to do well. Listen, I want to say that I appreciate this very much because I know logistically speaking, it's not easy for you to get here. So when you are here, it's great to have you on the set. We appreciate it. I got to mention a name at you right here, Kerry Trotter. It's going to be nothing to anybody watching who's outside of Marquette.
Yeah, Kerry Trotter, Marquette basketball player, came from Omaha Creighton Prep, which is a high school that I went to. I'm unfortunately old enough to be Kerry Trotter's dad, more than likely. But I do remember, and we Creighton Prep kids from Omaha, and I know you're
Omaha guy here. Yep,
so I want to say thank you so much to Wager Talk for having me on. I love you guys' platform. You're doing great work here, and really want to just say thank you.
Appreciate it very much. Folks, if you like what you see, all you got to do is hit that thumbs up button on your screen and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Share it with your friends, wagertalk.com. Thanks to Lou. We've also got plenty of college and pro football with Dave Koken and Marco D'Angelo. Check out the videos all weekend long here at wagertalk.com.